Thank you for being here today, David. Could you tell us
Pleasure to
about
be
your
here.
background? Yeah, could you tell us about your background and your career?
Oh, I grew up in the mining business. My father was a mining financier. He was a stockbroker in the 50s and 60s. He started Avino in 1968. I worked in the mine as a teenager back in the 80s. I worked in Nevada. We had a project there. So I learned the business from the ground up. I studied some geology and business at university, and also worked in the brokerage industry. So in the late 80s, early 90s, I worked several years here in Vancouver. I worked on the floor of the Vancouver Stock Exchange. Around the time computers came in and it went automated. So then I moved upstairs and was an assistant to a senior partner at a firm and learned the world of finance, and then joined my father in the 90s. He had several junior mining companies, and Avino was a flagship. The other one was Coral Gold in Nevada, which eventually got sold, the project to Newmont and Barrick near the Pipeline mine, which is a huge Cortez mine. And so been in the business a long time. Been with Avino since the 90s, and then during the first tech bubble in 2000, metal prices were very depressed, and the mine closed after 27 years of production. And shortly after that, I approached my father and the board of directors and said NAFTA's in place and foreign ownership could go to 100%, and we should look at acquiring the other half of the mine, because Avino only owned 49% for 27 years because there was no NAFTA back in the late 60s when my father formed the company. So I was appointed president, and it took several years to negotiate to buy the other half of the mine, which happened in 2006. The stock took off, raised a bunch of money, reassembled the team, did a lot of drilling between 2006 and 8. Then the next financial crisis happened in 2008, and we decided to go after production. So we refurbished the plant and commissioned it in 2010, and we went through 3 expansions since that time. So we're operating now at 2,500 tons per day. So that's the history real fast.
How many shares do you own of Avino?
I own about 3.3 million shares.
Awesome. And that's common? That is excluding options, RSUs, and other performance units.
Exactly. Yep. I'm personally the largest shareholder of the company.
So now, core mining, your former largest shareholders is out of the picture. Who are your key shareholders now besides yourself?
Silver ETF title. So they're the largest shareholders, and there's some other institutional, but basically it's a retail held stock. So it's widely distributed across the globe because it's been a public company for over 50 years. So we have thousands of shareholders. So it's a good thing. There's not a lot of people holding a lot of stock that could hold it down. And you can see the action in the market, how we've reacted during this rally.
Could you summarize the year so far for Avino?
Oh, it's been a great year for us. We got the social blessing from the community where La Preciosa is. La Preciosa we acquired in 2022. It's a huge endowment of silver and gold, over 20 million tons, 140 million ounces of silver equivalent. So in order to get the necessary mining approvals, you need their blessing. So we got that in earlier this year and submitted that to the government, the environmental minister, and so just waiting for the green light to go ahead on La Preciosa. And we've been preparing the surface buildings, explosive holding buildings, and that sort of thing, and the offices getting ready for when we start mining there.
Thank you for being here today. Could you introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us about your career?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So my name is Nathan Harte. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Avino Silver and Gold Mines. I joined Avino about 8 years ago and have been in the role of CFO since late 2018. My previous experience was with Deloitte in Vancouver, Canada, where I served primarily mining clients, both in the production and exploration phase, as well as actually some royalty and streaming clients. As I speak English, French, and Spanish, I was fortunate enough to get to do a lot of travel around the world with many clients in West Africa and in Latin America, and got to experience a lot of operations firsthand, both large scale and small scale, and a lot of other cultures as well, which was a fantastic experience.
How much of your net worth is allocated with Avino?
Ooh, personally, too much. No, I'm kidding. Most of it. Yeah, I have a lot of skin in the game. I own about 500,000 shares personally. And as many people in Vancouver, the rest of it is tied up in a house.
But so then, moving on to Avino, could you summarize Avino's capital structure with regards to shares outstanding, warrants, options, and also add some color to the financial position?
So our current capital structure, we have about 135 million shares outstanding, no warrants or debt other than equipment lease and loans, which through our partners at Caterpillar and Sandvik. And then there's about 10 million in options and RSUs, so 145 million fully diluted. I think most of those are around this price, or a lot of them are not in the money as well right now. So a lot of incentive to get the share price higher. Our working capital has grown significantly in the past 12 months. I think it's about tripled. I think we're close to 14 million at June 30th, and we were under 5 million June 30th of last year. And our cash position continues to grow on a monthly basis. I think it was about 5.3 million at the end of June, and continues to grow on a monthly basis with these metal prices and the operation humming along nicely.
As a CFO, what's the minimum working capital and also cash that you would want to have at any point in time?
For us, I mean, obviously coming through a bit of a tougher period in later 2023, early 24, with the Mexican peso impacting us, inflation impacting us, metal prices weren't the strongest. Obviously, since second quarter rallied and the pesos turned back in our favor. So I've raised the amount of minimum I'd like to have. I think 10 million in working capital. Obviously, we want to be able to withstand any significant downtime should an unforeseen event happen. And also we're looking forward to La Preciosa and the development there. And then on the cash side, I think we just want to keep building the treasury through the operational cash flow. And I think we've been pretty successful at that throughout the second and into the third quarter. So I'd like to get back up to 10 million in cash. I think, yeah, we have 5.3 at the end of June, and that has grown since as well too. So hopefully by the Q3, end of Q4, we're in that $10 million range.
How do you store your cash?
Most of it's held with larger banks, and then we ladder a little bit and try and earn as much interest as we can on the cash that we know we're not going to need to touch for a smaller period of time. And then obviously we need to keep some cash liquid for ongoing payables, etc.
Could you remind everyone of the production guidance for 2024 and how you're tracking to reach it?
2.4 to 2.8 million ounces of silver equivalent. We're in the middle of that tracking. In Q2, we had an issue with the cone crushers, so that's why our production was lower than normal in Q2, but that's been upgraded and we're back on track. So things are looking good. Our grades are good. We had good grades in Q2, and then the peso's been weakening, so that's good for the company because we pay our workers in pesos and we sell our product in dollars.
What efforts and initiatives do you have in order to get your throughput closer to, nameplate capacity is 2,500 tons per day, and get up to at least 2,000 and beyond?
Well, the cone crusher was down for a few weeks, but we have 2 spares, so it didn't impact us 100%. So we were able to produce even while we were fixing the main cone crusher. So that was down for a few weeks. That's been rectified. So we're on track to do probably 160, maybe 170,000 tons in the quarter.
What is the expected throughput and grades for the second half of this year?
Similar. We do like 50 or 60 grams silver, half a gram gold. We've been getting some decent gold grades, anywhere from 0.6 to 0.8% copper. Really depends on mine sequencing, but we're expecting to have a good second half.
So you you processed 10,000 tons of stockpile ore from La Preciosa this in the Q2. How did the grades and recovery rates reconcile with your expectations?
Honestly, I think the grade was a little lower than we expected on the silver side, given the historical reports we had. We did do a comprehensive resampling of everything, and that's where we got to, is understanding that we were going to get a bit lower grade. Having said that, the material was sitting there for decades on surface. I think it goes back to the 70s, 80s, from Lewis Mean, where it was really a development drift at that time. But on the recovery side, we were pleasantly surprised, I would say, because given that the grade was a lot lower than expected from our test work, if we can translate these recoveries to the fresh material, we see a lot of upside compared to our initial comprehensive test work and when we get to production.
How much more stockpile ore do you have left to process?
I think just around 5,000 tons. There is a lot of other material as well too, that we have not sampled yet, but we have 5,000 tons that we've hauled to Avino, and that we know is economical right now. And that's what we want to try and learn from as well too. So we've been processing some of that throughout Q3 as well too. And I think that will be the end of that program, probably maybe a little bit into Q4, but I think we'll be done this program in Q3.
What room is there for improvements and recoveries for La Preciosa ore?
I think there's a lot of room for improvement, considering the grade on the stockpile material was, about, call it 25-30% of what we expect to see in the fresh stuff, especially at Gloria and Abundancia, which in the resource I think have about 3 to 350 grams silver. So if we can maintain our tailings grade around, I think we were around 25 or 30 grams per ton that was going to the tailings. If we can maintain that on the fresh material, basic math gets us to, 90% or above in recovery rates, which would be fantastic. And definitely higher than what our expectations were when we set out with our initial comprehensive test work program. But that's only on the silver. I think on the gold side, we're not expecting much more, just because there might be some pockets with a bit higher grade, like we do see at Avino even as well. But the average grade is 0.25, 0.3, 0.4 at its highest, and it's going to be tough to get that much more gold out of that material.
So around 60% on the gold side.
Maybe we might get into the 70s. I think would be great. I think internally we were thinking around 65, 70%. But then on the silver, a lot of our initial work was suggesting around 80, and now we're looking higher, I think, hopefully. Yeah, knock on wood. But I think having these stockpiles has helped the team learn a lot. And that was, obviously we were happy to process the material, and we're gonna sell that product and at least probably break even, make a little bit of cash on it. But at the same time, we're gonna learn a lot of how to set up the mill, especially with the circuits we want to run that material through.
You got some feedback on your environmental permit application that you just responded to. What was that about?
Yeah, we have received feedback regarding the environmental permit. The main questions we received actually related to existing permits that Coeur had set up, because obviously we acquired the La Preciosa entity, not just the asset. But Coeur, those had never really been closed, and some of the operations reports that you have to provide were a little outdated. So the environmental agency was looking for more information. These permits were just for exploration drilling, for trenching, and other various activities. And I think the agency, they just wanted an update on the status of work, and was it completed? Was it not completed? Are you still going to carry this out, etc.? So our team has spent a number of weeks gathering all the information, and we were able to resubmit all that required information that the agency wanted. And so that was our resubmission. And that's all they've been asked for at this time.
When do you expect to have the environmental permit in place?
We do expect to receive it in short order. The agency has been following all the appropriate timelines that have been laid out, regardless of what the current government administration is in Mexico. So we are very appreciative of that. Again, we feel we've provided all the information and completed all the required steps. So we should hear in pretty short order. We feel that it's coming very soon.
What permit is required for construction of the portal, haulage ramp, and also start mining of the Gloria and Abundancia veins?
Yeah, so there are 2 permits required. The environmental permit, which is the one we're in the process of hopefully wrapping up quite shortly. and is followed by an explosives permit for blasting and drilling in the underground, which you need obviously to start any of the development work. And that comes from the Mexican Army. We've been successful, obviously, receiving these with Avino over the years, and there's pretty strict requirements on how you have to house everything and everything like that. So we feel that we've got a submission that covers all that. And it is reviewed as part of the environmental permit as well, too. It's just that you have to go to the Army separately to get that approved. Once we have both of those in hand, we can start development the next day, essentially.
So I mean, we're talking before the end of the year or sometime in Q1, or what's your feeling?
Yeah, so obviously the timeline of the environmental permit is expected to be very short order. I mean, we're hopeful that we're talking definitely weeks, not months. And the agency does have until about October would be the end of their response timeline, I think, but they were quicker than the allowed time, I guess, for their first response. So we do see indications that it won't take that long. And regarding the explosives permit in the past for Avino, because you do have to, the initial one obviously we got years ago, but you do have to renew every year. It is taken up to 60 days, but sometimes less as well too. But obviously we can't submit that until we have the environmental permit in hand. So in our mind, it is receiving both before the end of the year.
So then what's the expected cost to drive down the ramp to the Gloria vein and get started with the mining?
So we put out a Capex guidance at the beginning of the year, which would have included the development all the way down to develop in Gloria, and then I believe slashing out for the first few levels up at the top, level, I think all the way down to level 4. We're planning 7 levels at Gloria. And the cost is about 3 to 4 million on all that. And that would get us developing probably close to 1 million tons of material, which is fantastic.
Okay, so just a few million, really, like 3.
Yes, yeah, and that was what we had indicated pretty early on, that this is, the initial development is not going to cost very much. It gets us in the Gloria, it gets us moving towards, I wouldn't say commercial production, but it gets us towards a point where we can start hauling initial tonnage out and start getting it over to the mill so that we can get our mill up to the expected run rate that we want to see from La Preciosa material.
Awesome. And what mining rates are you targeting once ramped up?
So obviously, like, commercial production or commercial mining is determined by a variety of factors. Our situation is unique because we do have the mill facility already. And, with 4 independent circuits, we can allocate based on how much tonnage we have. I think our internal expectations is that we want to be able to fill 2 of the smaller circuits, and we feel like we will be able to pull fresh material out within 6 months of starting development, but obviously at a bit of a smaller scale up front, and then after that we'll be able to ramp up to where we expect to be. From Gloria and then eventually the Abundancia vein.
Next year, say in second half of next year, how much feed do you think should come from the Gloria or from La Preciosa?
The hope is that we can get up to filling the 2 small circuits, which would be kind of like our target for by the end of next year. So that would be about 400 to 500 tons per day, and then having them operate on a continuous basis with consistent recovery rates and producing a concentrate product that is on spec with expectations or what our traders would expect to see too. And again, that won't happen right away, but we feel we can get to that level pretty quickly following the development stage. So I think hopefully by the end of next year we can get either closer to that level. I think the initial stages, obviously, as we develop, there's development ore and then there's production ore. And I think once we fully develop the Gloria vein, that's when we'll start to really be able to increase the mining rates.
What's the expected all-in sustaining cost per silver equivalent ounce for second half of this year?
I think initially when we set out our budget at the beginning of the year, we were looking at around 22 for the whole year. We were hopeful to be closer to 20, but obviously the peso was quite strong the first, 5 months of the year. Having said that, it has gone the other way now, and the USD is gotten a lot stronger compared to the peso. So we are doing some mitigation strategies to protect and try and lock in some of that, some of the rates we're seeing now. At which point that would help help on the cost structure side and try and get us down close, hopefully under 20. I'm not quite sure we can get there for the second half of the year, but I would like to see us around that $20 per ounce. And especially at these silver prices, that should be a fair amount of margin.
How do you expect the AISC to change with La Preciosa?
With La Preciosa, we do expect it to come down as we scale up. Initially, I wouldn't read too much into, the first, call it, couple quarters of production from La Preciosa. Obviously, there'll be sustaining development costs as we develop in, and then as we fine tune at the beginning with smaller tonnage and get the hauling procedures all tightened up. But long term, we do expect significant reductions. The grade is, we're talking on a silver equivalent basis over 2 times what we're doing at Avino right now, or about 2 times what we're doing at Avino right now. So we know the costs on our mill very well. We know what it's going to be to haul it over to La Preciosa or to Avino. So it's just making sure that our mining costs stay in check. And we should be able to, on a consolidated basis with more ounces and trying not to increase overhead in conjunction with those increased ounces in production. I think that'll be the key where we realize some economies of scale is and be able to bring our AISC down.
That's where you are, below 20.
Yes, definitely. I think long term, with those 2 projects, as we continue to scale up La Preciosa, and then as long term, as we look towards the Tailings project, a few years down the road, I mean, the goal of the company is to be down in that $12 to $14 range for AISC, assuming constant factors of the peso, etc. But I think we can get there. I think with La Preciosa, the more ounces that come out of there, the lower our consolidated all-in cost will end up being. Avino is it's a large operation. It's a lower grade operation, which means our cost per ton is quite low, but on the cost per ounce, you have to make sure that the grade matches up. So with La Preciosa, there's a bit more, I wouldn't say wiggle room, but more grade that can help drive that process and drive lower costs.
In terms of exploration, no drilling planned for this year. What exploration activities are you undertaking?
Exploration-wise, we're carrying out recommendations that were made by 2 consulting structural geologists that we've been using to help understand the mineralization. And mines are structurally controlled. The mineralizations come up from the core of the earth based on the structures above. So understanding that. So we're doing a fluid inclusion study, but no drilling this year. That's because we're focused on rebuilding replenishing our treasury, because we paid $20 million acquiring La Preciosa, and last year wasn't a great year for mining. So this year we're seeing our treasury grow substantially, and next year we'll be back drilling. So we've just been focused on production at the mine and moving La Preciosa forward. That's a key pillar for us for our growth. We're hoping it's going to contribute substantially next year to our output.
That drilling that you'll be undertaking next year, will that be to sort of drill at depth to target some sort of porphyry intrusive body, or what's the drilling purpose?
Oh yeah, we've drilled at depth last couple of years below the level 17, which is the bottom developed area of the mine, and we've extended the mineralization substantially. There's many years more of mine life. So further drilling is required to go and test the extent at depth, but the jury's out on, what is possible down deeper, where the intrusive is there a porphyry potential, volcanic massive sulfide, or some other type of mineralization. This is what the structural geologists are trying to help us identify. Usually you would know that before you build the mine, but the feasibility study was done in 1968, so not a lot of work was done back then. My father, when he got involved, basically rebuilt the mill on the old foundations that the British owned it in the 1800s, and there was a smelter there. All of that was destroyed in the Revolution, so there was no mining there until we got involved. And basically the Avino vein itself is a stockwork system, so it's really large. So it's a bulk tonnage underground mine. So it was easy to identify on surface. And we've been mining it for many, many years. So trying to understand the source is what we're still looking for. So even after all these decades, hundreds of years, actually, the mine was discovered in the 1500s. And it's still the gift that keeps giving.
How's the community engagement going for the Oxide Tailings project?
Fine, but that's not a priority. The priority is La Preciosa. Oxide Tailings is not scheduled to contribute anything until 2027, 2028. So there's still several years out before we make a construction decision on that project. But community engagement is ongoing. We're always in the communities providing support, infrastructure support, medical support, supplies. But more work needs to be done on the Oxide Tailings before we build that one out. So everyone should pay attention to La Preciosa. That's the main driver of our growth going forward in the near term.
You have quite a few non-core assets. Are you running any sale process for some of them?
Not really. We've disposed of most of the non-core assets. The old Braylord mine and other properties here in British Columbia have been optioned out or sold. And so in Mexico, there's a couple projects we optioned to Silverwolf. There's just one or two other ones, so just grassroots exploration. So if other companies are interested, we entertain optioning off to them.
I mean, you have smaller positions in Talisker, Endurance Gold, and also a Silverwolf exploration, which you mentioned. What's your plan for your shareholding in these companies?
Well, we've got a sizable holding in Talisker and Silverwolf, but our plans is just to hold them for investment purposes. And hopefully, they're successful in developing those assets.
In a month from now, we will have a new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, still from the same party, left-wing party as Marina, as the former president. So what are your thoughts on how her rule will affect the Mexican mining industry in general, and also how it will affect Avino in particular?
We don't expect it to affect us in particular, but I think she's going to follow predecessor for a period of time and then eventually want to make a name for herself. Highly educated person. We think that probably won't be focused so much on the mining space. And so, there's nothing that affects Avino at this time. So there's, for newcomers coming to the country, that's going to be difficult. We're well established. We have 470 people working for us. So they're pro jobs. And with La Preciosa, we're going to hire another 100 people. So we're the primary employer of this region. So mining is really important for Mexico, especially in remote areas where the mines are discovered and the infrastructure is built up. It allows people to move away from the big cities and get decent jobs. So I don't expect anything to impact Avino.
And so, I mean, your share price has doubled since we last spoke, which means that you now have currency. I think it would be good to clarify, are your focus completely to get La Preciosa done, or are you running, having a corporate development team active looking for other assets?
No, we're focused on our growth strategy. We have a clear path of transformational growth. That's our tagline. So we have three key pillars: Avino, La Preciosa, Oxide Tailings, to get us up to between 8 and 10 million ounces of silver equivalent on an annual basis. And that's within 5 years. So we don't need to do M&A to grow. We can grow organically, and we're going to use our cash flow. So we have infrastructure. So you got certainty there and development. We're not going to need tons of money to get La Preciosa up and running. So there's $3 to $4 million to start the decline and start mining there on a smaller scale. If we want to speed it up, then that will cost more money. The Oxide Tailings project, that's going to be a significant capital expenditure, 50 to 60 million, but that's not for a few years out. So we have time to build our war chest, and we'll have other options available to us if we wanted to consider debt, but right now we're debt free. So, I mean, that's why the stock's performing well. There's nothing holding us back, and we've got high leverage to the metal price with all our ounces, and blue sky potential with the growth that we own. So we don't need to go out and hire people or corporate development people to do M&A, not at this time. And as I mentioned earlier, our price to net asset value is low. So if we had a much higher PNAV, then we could use equity leverage to acquire other assets, but not at this time. We're focused on building what we have.
It's good that you're pointing that out, because that's usually, at least from what I'm hearing, the biggest fear among investors, that, when precious metals companies start to run, they have a habit of acquiring things that maybe aren't too good for shareholders.
No, and small juniors tend to take on more than they can handle. So when the market corrects, then shareholders are facing dilution, so they could just maintain their operations. We have a lean team, and so we're not building a large middle management team to go and acquire and manage other assets. We have one team, and that's why our costs are very competitive. And considering our grades are not that high with Avino, it's more lower grade bulk tonnage. But with La Preciosa, that's more than double the grade. So now we're going to have higher grade going through the mill. So it's going to lower our cost, increase our output. So we're really excited about La Preciosa coming online soon.
Where do you envision Avino silver and gold mines in 2 years?
In 2 years. So we're doing about 2.5 million ounces of silver equivalent this year. So probably the production will be 50% higher. So 3.5, so yeah, La Preciosa is going to contribute a lot, and it's because of grade. The grade is so much higher, so we don't need a lot of tons to make a big impact on our production. And we have flexibility in our mill. We have 3 or 4 independent circuits after the primary crushing circuit, so we can keep the ore separate. This is unique. It's not typical for a mining operation to have different circuits. It's just because it laddered up over 5 decades. So it just expanded. So now we can treat different types of ore if you can't commingle them. And so we produce an end product, concentrate, which is a security feature. We're not producing gold or silver or copper cathode or anything like that on site. So no one bothers us. It goes to the shipping port of Manzanillo and goes over to Asia to their smelters, and our primary customer is Samsung. Go figure. So the large electronic company, largest in the world probably, sourcing raw materials from an ethical source. They said they like Avino, family-run business for all these years, must have done something right to still be running it. And they're looking at building solid-state batteries with silver in it. So to me, in my mind, in the next few years, you're going to see silver much, much higher because the demand is growing and supply can't keep up. I mean, mines are getting harder to find, difficult to permit. If they don't have infrastructure, they take years. In the past, you would say 8 to 10 years from discovery to processing. Now it's double that. It's probably 20 years before from a discovery to production. So demand is growing with solar, EVs. So it's eminent that the price is going to go higher.